Grab a cocktail with us and welcome to the hot mess that is my life as a single makeup artist living in a college town in Florida. This is Kara's Lipstick Diary.
All right, you guys, and we are back for the second half of this episode with Kelly as we discuss the super deep issue of suicide. So make sure you hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss out when we are releasing these episodes because they are now coming out weekly. So hit that subscribe button and let's get back into the conversation.
I mean, first off, I don't know how I didn't die. It must have been a partial bottle of Prozac. Yeah. I don't know because I took all the pills that I had. If it had been a full bottle, I would be dead. Yeah. I mean, I don't think one's, 14-year-old body can take that. But yeah, I mean, if there had been a gun in my house, exactly, I'd be dead. Yeah. Point blank, I would have killed myself because there would have been such easy access. Instead, it was an X-Acto knife I used to make clay figurines with, and a partial bottle of Prozac. And seriously, hotels do not have your freaking top floor rooms have a freaking window that opens. I look back and I'm like, what the hell type of liability is that shit? But, I agree. The access to ways with which to, end your life are much more prevalent now. Yeah. It's much easier. Yeah. And we've just come off of, 2 years of a pandemic that really impacted people's mental health. And I think that that's why, we're seeing it constantly in the news now. Yeah. Constantly. And it's always some top athlete, some Hollywood movie star, some, somebody like that where you're like, they have a great life. What the hell? But there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Two of the kind of biggest factors we're looking at was suicide. And at one of the residential centers I worked at, we would always do this assessment with client, and you're assessing for your level of hope. Yeah. So you're assessing someone's level of hope or hopelessness. And then you're also, and I think this speaks to the pandemic, you're also assessing what is this person's degree of connection. Yeah. And those are going to be two of the biggest indicators for suicide.
And even, we're getting over COVID now, though literally we filmed 5 episodes today, and one of my, people ended up not being able to come because she got COVID today, like crazy. You would think it would be over at this point. But we're still so disconnected. Yes. We're still not in the same level of connection that we were before, and even then you add on top of that, having to do, telehealth medicine is fantastic and it is amazing, but there's something different about sitting in a room with a person. Yes, very different. And, I can imagine that made your job extremely hard during that time period. And to even gauge, because I'm sure body language is something that you have to really read when you're working with a patient. You can't see it as much. You can't tell what's, all of that. I don't know how you guys, that period, being a mental health provider during the past couple of years must have been really an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Interesting is a good word for it. It was funny when I don't know if funny is the right word, but when we started telehealth, and all the things I remember how tense I would get because I was trying to absorb every ounce of nonverbal or just information I could from the client through the screen. But one thing that, we actually stayed open throughout the entire pandemic.
That's amazing.
Doctors, I have nurses, I have, first responders, and, we would wear masks or we would push the chairs to far corners of the room. But I was like, they're showing up to work every day.
Like, we're going to make sure.
I want to make sure they're taken care of. And I agree. It's so important if they want it to have that connection in the room.
Yeah, I know the minute that I could go back in person with my therapist, I was like, we're going back in person. Like, cause I couldn't connect the way I needed to with my therapist. And like I say, that booking that appointment and having it standing on my calendar. And the other issue we're talking about, the access to ways to end your life are so much easier, but the access to mental health care seems so much harder. Whether it's price, whether it's this, whether it's that, and it's one of those things that like everyone, in my opinion, should be in therapy. We all kind of need it. And it's really sad that not enough people have access to it. For whatever reason.
I think we touched on this earlier, but just like everyone has physical health, everyone has mental health. And so again, therapy, is that like going to the gym? I want to stay healthy. I want to stay in good shape. I want to be working out the kinks or, getting that feedback or whatever it is. And also the empathy of how many barriers there are to mental health. And that's something at my practice we're really trying to tackle. We work outside of insurance, which does make it more difficult for some people, but it also allows us to provide the quality and the type of care without
Me too.
being dictated by the insurance. And then we just have interns, and we have therapists at kind of all different stages in their career, and we offer, all the way down to pro bono sessions.
Well, and that's, my therapist has a full practice as well. You probably know my therapist, and that's one of the things she offers as well, where it's like, we have them at therapists at all different, price breakdowns, this, that, and the other, because, people need to be able to access it. And, when you're talking, $175 a session, that's not doable for a lot of people. Yeah. That's really not doable. That is a large chunk of money to be putting out there. And sometimes it's weekly, and that's a challenge, and it's really too bad, because this is, I was saying to someone recently, and they were the price factor came in, and I looked at them and I said, so here's the thing. You cannot go to therapy and struggle and not be productive in your career and not be able to make the choices you need to make and all of that. Or you can sacrifice the Starbucks or the this or the that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not sacrificing my Starbucks. So we'll find something else to sacrifice. Because that, to me, I become more productive when I go to therapy, which means I'm going to make more money, which means I'm going to make better choices in what I do, which is, again, going to lead to making more money. So if I prioritize paying for that, I'm going to be on a better path. Now, it sucks because sometimes that's not even an option. Sometimes we're already at the point where there's nothing we can eliminate budget-wise. I've been there. Many of you know my story of, when I was working 60 to 80 hours a week and my monthly take-home pay was $1,700 a month. There sure as fuck was no money for therapy at that point. That was probably when I needed it the most. But, we 100% get that. But I found prioritizing, putting money towards that has helped me with every other thing I've done.
Yeah, one of my kind of favorite, I don't really like the term mental illness, but one way I do like to define it is often we fall into unhealthy patterns when we have disordered priorities.
Yes.
And one way of resetting that is everything falls into place so much more smoothly when we have ourselves at the top of that priority list. And I think that's what therapy does. And there are tons of studies, I just talked about this morning, but of how EQ is one of the biggest indicators of success. That if you have a higher emotional intelligence, if you have more self-awareness, you're going to be more successful, not only in your personal life and with your relationships, but also in your careers and professionally. And again, if you put yourself first, everything else tends to fall into place.
And that, oh my God, the amount, because I threw myself into therapy big time in 2019. I went in for one specific reason and then realized, there was a whole lot of other shit. That is a big onion that we are peeling back. But I was saying to someone earlier, I'm president of one of the chapters of the networking group that you and I are both in. And I was saying, if I had done that 5 years ago, I would not have survived it. I would have had a total mental breakdown. I'm now in my second year of doing it. And the things that would have totally freaked me out in the past are nothing now. I would have never launched the show if it wasn't for the therapy that I'd gone through. It allowed me the openness to be able to live who I am and how I am without that fear, without that burden, without all of that. There are so many things in my life that I would not have been able to do if it wasn't for therapy. And my therapist, she always kind of slightly rolls her eyes and she's like, Kara, but I always look at her and I'm like, dude, you don't understand. Like, you have saved my life and changed my life. She's like, you're the one who did the work. I'm like, no, I know. Yes, I did the work. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. But like, those tools that were given to me through therapy have literally changed every aspect of my life in a way that I didn't know you could even live your life.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me emotional hearing you tell that story. And I think it goes back to that idea of the work we do. To me, it's such a privilege. It's such a privilege to get to hold that space for people. And, and I also wonder if you're also not even giving yourself enough credit, as it sounds like your therapist was trying to say. But when I see a big part of my job is it's my job to meet the client where they're at. So I think, even if you had come in, we might have been a few, layers above on the onion. We might have needed to start somewhere that was a little easier, a little more accessible. But I think, just as a therapist, I see that as my responsibility of like, okay, where is this client at? What's going to feel comfortable and yet mildly challenging that's appropriate for where they're at in their journey?
Well, and like I say, I didn't realize when I walked into the therapy in 2019 that I was having those suicidal thoughts. Like, because it was just thoughts that I would have every single time I got behind that car. Like, I'd get in the car and immediately my head would go there. And it wasn't until I started processing everything in therapy that I went, oh shit. I was I was in a bad, and I will have to say, I have to thank my friend. I opened up to a random friend. He came over, we were having cocktails, we were talking, and for some reason I started opening up, and he was like, so we're going to call Jen tomorrow. You're going to have a therapy appointment like this week. Like we're going to get you in therapy. And it's funny because I'm now doing that with my friends. Yeah. Like I will be talking to a friend and I'm like, have you thought about therapy? And I'm happy. Many of them have started going to therapy. And I look at my life and I'm like, I want you all to feel the way I feel now and not the way I have felt in the past. Yeah. I'm just so happy to be here because there's a good chance I wouldn't be here. That's crazy. Like I look at that and I'm like, how is that possible? Because now I'm like, I can't imagine going down that path. But there's a good chance I would not have made it past 8th grade. Yeah. I would have been one of those kids you hear about who killed themselves in middle school because that's where I was, and when we look at Twitch, when we look at Robin Williams, when we look at all these different people, it's heartbreaking because it's not what you expect.
Yeah, absolutely. At a place I worked, we would often have clients do a trauma timeline, but kind of conjointly with that, we would have them do what we called their angel timeline. And it was, who were the people in your life that were safe for you, that did take care of you, that did have your back? And, again, just to kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, the people who know the most suffering can bring the most joy. Like, I hear because of the experiences you've been, like, I guarantee those moments you've offered to others are showing up on their angel timeline of, because you've know what that suffering is like, you've seen it, you've been there. Yeah. And so when you see someone you care about there, it's stepping in and saying, hey, I love you, I'm here to support you. And often there does also need to be that professional help. There needs 100%. To be that extra that network of support.
Well, and I also, in media, like when you're watching a movie, the person who kills themselves in a movie is usually like this dark, gloomy, like, oh, that's the one. We all know that's the one. But in real life, that's not always the way it works at all. And I think that's one of the interesting things, the misnomers in, a lot of our societal, how we talk about different things, whether it's, what sex really is or what suicide really is. What we see in media is not always accurate. And I think we really need to open that dialogue to the fact that how it is portrayed on television in movies is oftentimes a very far cry from what it really is.
Yeah. I think, we've kind of touched on often those are the people who have the most life, the most joy, the most spark. And I think also what I touched on earlier of, I think some of my most shocking suicide attempts from clients have been things actually started to get better. Yeah. And that was so scary. It was like, I don't know how to deal with this world. This is overwhelming. I feel inadequate. Yeah.
The inadequate.
Changing. And so I think it's, again, so different from what we see in media. And often it can be when things look good and going well.
It's funny that you just said the inadequate thing, because I think, there's that imposter syndrome. Yeah. And when you have been so dark for so long and having these thoughts, when you don't, and when things start going really well, there is this.
It's disorienting.
It's disorienting. Why me? Why do I deserve this? It's funny because I literally earlier today was talking about the fact that this year I have had 3 friends pay for vacations for me. And I've never in my life had anything like that happen. And I was like, I don't know why. Like, why did I deserve that? Like, why? And I think that goes back to that idea of I never felt that I was worthy of someone doing something like that for me. And to be on this other side, it's still like jarring. It's like, wait, people like me? Like, people want to hang out with, people want to give me, like, I don't understand. And I think that's so weird, because I had literally, thank you for my little therapy session right here. I had never put those two things, but that is very, very, because there's this whole just lack of worthiness, lack of worthiness to exist, lack of all of that. And then when suddenly you realize you are worthy of living, it is kind of jarring.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think, again, all of the jarring self-worth that comes with that, or just realizing like my presence does matter and like people do want me here. And again, I think that can then also, like we're saying, trigger some of that inadequacy of either I'm not worthy or I'm not up to it.
I'm not supposed to.
This is too overwhelmed. This is not meant for me.
Well, and I think one of the things when you have those suicidal feelings, you don't feel like you are worthy.
Yeah.
You feel like you're such a burden to the world around you. You can't understand that people want you around, that people need you around, that you make the world a better place. So I had never thought, thank you. You just helped me out. I just got more depth into this. This is fantastic. But that, I mean, I think this is one of those, oftentimes I say on the show, this is one of those conversations that can just keep going on and on and on. We do have to wrap up this episode, but this is such an important topic. And, you know, we're seeing such a spike in numbers of suicide. We're seeing so many of the people that we look up to in society committing suicide, that this is something we need to be aware of. Yes. We need to be aware of the people in our lives that we sometimes think might have the most perfect life in the world, might be the happiest person in the world. They might be the ones who are actually hurting the most. You know, so thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. It's a tough subject. This is one of those vulnerable, hard episodes. Definitely a vulnerable, hard episode, but such an important thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think I would just end with, you know, one of the most important trainings I think we get as a therapist and that we try to train our therapists in is just never being afraid to ask the question and not being, you're not going to cause someone to commit suicide.
No, you're not.
Don't be afraid to ask. Ask them directly and ask them clearly. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself?
And that is so like important because, to be honest, we want that directness.
Yes.
And it is the fact that people
we want to feel seen.
Yes. And when we don't feel seen and no one is asking that, when that's where we are, we really reinforce the idea that we don't matter.
And the loneliness and the disconnection.
Oh my God, yes. You guys, this episode is super important. Please share this episode with people that you know, because I feel like this is one of those that really could change someone's life. Thank you again so much for being on the show. Thanks for watching, you guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. A little heavy today, but you know, that's what we do. We talk about all the things that we don't talk about in public. So let's talk about it. Hit the subscribe button and we'll see you again soon.